Hey everyone, tonight we're not stepping into no man's land, but into a trench soaked in mud and fear. The air is heavy with damp earth and cordite, your breath turning white in the freezing dawn. A whistle is about to blow, but before it does, the sergeant presses a tin cup into your hand. Rum, hot, sharp, burning its way down your throat until courage feels less like a choice, more like a command. You've heard of the Western Front, endless mud, shell fire, barbed wire. But what's less told is how drugs kept Britain's army moving. Rum to dull terror, cocaine pills to march through exhaustion, morphine to silence the screams of the wounded. These weren't luxuries. They were survival, stitched into every step, every charge, every night in the trench. If unearthing the forgotten addictions of history draws you in, please like and subscribe. And tell me, what truth about war's cost do you think history hides? The warmth of the rum spreads through you. A crude fire kindled deep within your belly, pushing back against the biting cold of the Ypres trench. Your hands, which moments ago trembled with an uncontrollable shiver against the rough metal of your rifle, now feel steadier, almost heavy with a borrowed calm. The biting wind still whips at the exposed skin of your face, carrying the distant, muffled thud of artillery. But inside, a strange numbness begins to settle. It's not a true comfort, not the gentle embrace of a warm blanket, but a stark, almost violent cessation of the agonizing fear that had been gnawing at your spirit. You grip the tin mug, the metal cool against your palm despite the lingering heat of the rum. The taste of the potent liquid still burns on your tongue, a sharp, metallic sweetness that reminds you of something both ancient and forbidden. You watch as the sergeant moves along the line, a shadow against the dim, pre-dawn light. His movements economical, practiced. Each man takes his share, a silent acknowledgement of the unwritten rule. This isn't a request for a drink. It's a ritual, a command, an essential component of the morning's grim preparations. You drain the last drop. The raw heat is a familiar companion now, and a sigh, almost imperceptible, escapes your lips. The mud beneath your boots, cold and clinging, seems less menacing. The damp earth smell, heavy with the scent of decay and distant cordite, becomes merely a backdrop, a dull hum in your dulled senses. You know, deep down, that this liquid courage is a double-edged sword, a fleeting illusion that will soon give way to the stark realities of the land beyond the wire. But for this moment, just this brief moment, you are steeled. You are ready. There's a shared, unspoken understanding among the men, a grim kind of humor that bubbles up like marsh gas in the trenches. You hear a low chuckle from a comrade beside you, a sound quickly stifled. "The king's courage," he whispers, his breath pluming white in the chill, "comes in liquid form these days." It's a bitter jest, but one that resonates with a profound truth. Unlike the fresh-faced American soldiers who would arrive later, unfamiliar with such daily customs, you, a British Tommy, have grown accustomed to this daily rum ration. It is not an indulgence, but a staple, as common and as expected as the hardtack biscuits in your pack. It is the fuel for the coming fight, a dark sacrament administered before the whistle blows, before you must climb out into that desolate, pockmarked landscape, where death waits with indifferent patience. You feel the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing now, a stark contrast to the ragged gasps of just moments before. And a strange, almost detached sense of purpose settles over you. The whistle has blown, the charge has happened, and the ensuing chaos has stretched on for what feels like an eternity. Days blur into a single, exhausting struggle against the mud, the enemy, and your own failing body. Sleep is a distant memory, a luxury you can barely recall. Your muscles ache with a deep, persistent throb, and your eyelids feel weighted down, threatening to close despite your desperate will to keep them open. You reach into your pocket, your fingers brushing against the cool, smooth tin you've come to rely on. It's a small, unassuming container, filled with what the men call forced march pills. Sold legally back home in England, a stark reminder of the strange, desperate measures of this war. You swallow one of the small pills without water, the dry powder a faint bitterness on your tongue. For a moment, nothing. Then, a subtle shift. Like the turning of a key, your eyes widen, suddenly sharp, piercing through the gloom and the fatigue. Your heart, which had been sluggishly pounding, now begins to race, a rapid drumbeat beneath your ribs, pushing a surge of new, fiery energy through your veins. The leaden exhaustion that had clung to you, a heavy shroud, simply vanishes, as if evaporated by some unseen heat. You feel a strange lightness in your limbs, a renewed vigor that defies the 2 sleepless days you've endured. The world around you, previously a blurry, muted tableau of mud and shadows, snaps into vivid, almost unnerving focus. You can distinguish individual blades of grass, the intricate patterns of the barbed wire, the fleeting, phantom movements of what you take to be the enemy, the Hun shadows darting through the desolate landscape. You charge forward, the ground slick beneath your boots, the mud sucking at your heels. But you barely notice. The weariness is gone, replaced by an almost manic determination. You fire your rifle, the recoil a mere tremor in your revitalized arms. Your senses heightened, your mind racing too fast. Perhaps the world is a blur of motion, a symphony of destruction. Then, the illusion shatters, violently. From the corner of your eye, you see a comrade, his face contorted in a wide, hysterical laugh, a sound chillingly out of place amidst the gunfire and shouts. His eyes, wide and unfocused, roll back into his head, and he collapses. A sudden, lifeless heap in the mud. It is the first overdose you have witnessed. A stark, terrifying reminder that this manufactured courage comes at a steep, often fatal, price. The brief, intoxicating invincibility gives way to a chilling recognition of vulnerability, a whisper of the hidden cost of this desperate march. You realize, with cold certainty, that the clean-cut American troops would never have had access to such state-approved cocaine products, a difference in approaches that speaks volumes about the raw desperation that grips your own army. A dark thought surfaces, born of the exhaustion and the pill's lingering effects. Why, indeed, build tanks when men can be made to run on pure, desperate cocaine? Desperate. The scream is torn from your throat, a raw, animal sound swallowed almost instantly by the din of battle. A sudden, searing pain blossoms in your leg, a white-hot agony that radiates through your entire body, and the world tilts, collapses. You lie sprawled in the churned earth of no man's land, a fragile, broken thing amidst the shell craters and the endless mud. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, Each inhale a struggle, and you feel the icy, clinging mud seep into the fresh, gaping wound in your thigh. The metallic tang of your own blood fills your nostrils, mingling with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the damp earth. You try to move, to crawl, but the pain is a relentless, crushing weight, pinning you to the ground, a prisoner of your own shattered limb. The sound of rifle fire cracks overhead, the whistle of shrapnel a constant, terrifying song. Each note a reminder of your perilous position, exposed and vulnerable. Just as despair begins to settle, a shadow falls over you, a fleeting presence amidst the chaos. A medic, his face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, crawls cautiously towards you, moving with practiced, low urgency, heedless of the constant danger. He offers a quick, reassuring word, his voice calm amidst the storm, and you feel a cool touch on your skin, a momentary pressure. Then, a sharp, brief prick as the needle slides into your thigh, right beside the throbbing wound. The liquid enters your bloodstream, and almost immediately, a warmth, a profound, blessed relief begins to spread. Not just from the injection site, but throughout your entire being. The searing pain, that all-consuming fire, does not vanish completely, but it recedes, retreating to a dull ache, a distant throb that is finally bearable. The world around you softens, its harsh edges blurring, losing their terrifying clarity. The incessant, jarring explosions of the artillery become muted, distant thunder, the sharp crack of rifles fading into a gentle, dreamlike hum. You float, suspended in a hazy, tranquil state, the urgency and the terror of moments ago replaced by a profound, almost luxurious calm. You are still in no man's land, still surrounded by death, but the immediate, crushing weight of it has been lifted. You drift, somewhere between consciousness and a medicated sleep. And in that gentle drift, a new awareness slowly dawns. You have survived this encounter, for now, thanks to this potent elixir. But even in this softened reality, you feel a subtle craving begin to stir deep within you, a quiet whisper that suggests your body, having tasted this oblivion, will forever yearn for its return. Later, in the relative safety of the aid post, you witness another soldier, his eyes wide with a desperate, unspoken plea. Beg for more. He manages to steal a vial, and in the quiet of the night, he slips away, overdosing silently, his suffering ended by the very substance that had promised relief. You realize then, with a chilling clarity, that bullets did not choose who lived or died in this brutal dance. Sometimes, it was morphine that held that terrifying power. The air in the trench is thick with the scent of damp wool and the raw, potent smell of rum. You hold the tin cup, the liquid sloshing gently within, mirroring the uneasy churn in your gut. Before the Americans would eventually join this grim tableau, their soldiers often faced battle after listening to stirring speeches, their minds filled with grand ideals and patriotic fervor. But for you, a British Tommy, the preparation is far more visceral, far more immediate. Before you are asked to climb into the maelstrom, you are given rum. It is a simple, brutal equation. You raise the cup to your lips, the sharp, fiery liquid burning its way down your throat. Just as it did earlier, the warmth spreads, a numbing blanket over your raw nerves. You are not entirely sure if this is genuine courage you are imbibing, A sudden surge of bravery, or if it is merely a death sentence disguised as a reprieve. The line blurs in the haze of the alcohol. You look around at your comrades, their faces grim, some already swaying slightly, their eyes taking on a glassy sheen. There's a quiet camaraderie in this shared ritual, a silent understanding of the unspoken truth a soldier made drunk is often a soldier easier to command. A man terrified of death, his mind clear and sharp, might hesitate, might falter, might even refuse. But a man whose fears are dulled, whose senses are blunted by the insistent burn of rum, becomes a more pliable instrument of war. The sergeant's voice, when it comes, sounds distant, a muffled instruction through the rum-soaked haze. You find yourself nodding, ready to comply. The natural instinct for self-preservation muted, softened. This isn't a choice born of bravery, but a surrender, a loosening of the tight knots of fear that had constricted your chest. Diaries unearthed from this time, fragments of lives lived and lost, reveal a chilling pattern. Many of the assaults, the desperate charges across open ground into a hail of machine gun fire, succeeded not because of overwhelming courage or strategic brilliance, but because the men were too thoroughly inebriated to refuse the suicidal command. Their minds, clouded by rum, simply could not process the full, terrifying implications of what they were being asked to do. Obedience, you realize, came bottled in these small, tin cups. A powerful, insidious weapon wielded by those who directed this vast, horrifying machine of war. The mud, the cold, the ever-present danger, all of it seemed to recede, to dim, leaving only a strange, almost serene acceptance of whatever the next few moments would bring. The days of forced marches, fueled by those potent forced march pills, have bled into nights of fitful, restless non-sleep. You've been awake for what feels like an eternity, far beyond the 48-hour mark that once seemed an unimaginable stretch. The constant surge of energy has given way to a jittery, wired exhaustion, and your mind, once sharp with the pill's false clarity, now feels like a tangled knot of frayed nerves. The shadows, which previously danced innocently in the flickering light of the trench lamp, now seem to take on a life of their own. They crawl, they twist, they shift with malevolent intent across the rough, damp earth of the trench wall. Each rustle of the wind, each distant thud, is magnified, distorted into a potential threat. Your grip on your rifle tightens, knuckles white. Every nerve ending is screaming, attuned to a danger that feels imminent, palpable, yet remains unseen. You whisper a warning to your comrade, your voice hoarse, ragged. The fear gnaws at you, a cold, insidious dread that twists everything you see, everything you hear. A sudden movement, a flicker in your peripheral vision, and without a moment's hesitation, your training takes over, amplified by the terror. You bring your rifle up, firing wildly into the gloom, convinced you've spotted the enemy, the unseen Hun lurking in the darkness, ready to strike. The shots echo, deafening in the confined space. The muzzle flash momentarily blinding. Then, a shout, a cry of pain, and the horrifying realization crashes down upon you like a ton of earth. Your shots haven't struck the enemy. You've fired at your own men, at the very comrades you've shared these wretched hours with. The shame, the immediate, gut-wrenching horror, is a cold douse of reality. momentarily breaking through the drug-induced haze. You watch as a medic rushes to aid the wounded, your heart pounding with a mixture of terror and profound regret. Later, you hear the hushed conversations, the theories about shell shock, a term often used by the Americans to explain the shattered nerves and mental breakdowns of soldiers. But you know, deep in your gut, that what you and many other British Tommies are experiencing is something far more specific, far more chemical cocaine psychosis, a terrifying descent into drug-induced paranoia. The High Command, you later learn, is aware of these side effects. Yet, their orders persist, chillingly rational in their brutality, better paranoid than asleep. Sleep, in their calculus, is cowardice, a vulnerability. Paranoia, however twisted, is a form of courage, a heightened state of alert, even if it leads to the tragic consequences of friendly fire. The whispers continue. A dark, cynical humor permeating the trench's sleep was cowardice, they said. But paranoia, that was true courage, a grim testament to the desperate measures of a war that consumed not just bodies, but minds. While you shiver in the perpetual damp and mud of the front lines, your senses dulled by rum or sharpened by cocaine, a different reality unfolds a few miles behind the trenches, in the relative comfort of requisitioned French chateaux, away from the stench of death and the constant threat of artillery. The officers lead a markedly different existence. Here, the air is clean, free from the pervasive smell of cordite and decay. Fires crackle merrily in ornate fireplaces, casting a warm, inviting glow on polished wooden floors and comfortable, if somewhat worn, furniture. The only sounds are the distant, muffled echoes of the battle, softened by stone walls, and perhaps the gentle clinking of crystal glasses. You imagine them, seated in plush armchairs, their uniforms still relatively clean, their hands free from the caked mud that is your constant companion. Their chosen comforts, their remedies for the strain of war, are equally distinct. Instead of the crude, fiery rum that numbs your working-class fear, they have access to a more refined, more insidious array of substances. Morphine, administered with delicate syringes, its liquid glinting in the soft light of a gas lamp. Chloroform, used to calm nerves or ease a troubled sleep, and yes, even cocaine, though perhaps in a more discreet form, a private indulgence rather than a battlefield necessity. You picture a small, polished cabinet, perhaps in a quiet study, filled with these various vials and powders, a stark contrast to the rough tin you might carry in your own pocket. This hidden truth, this quiet disparity, speaks volumes about the deep-seated class divisions that persist even in the crucible of war. Addiction, it seems, follows a class line as clear as the trenches themselves. For the working-class Tommy, it is the rum, distributed en masse, a coarse, collective anesthetic. For the upper-class officer, it is the morphine, the chloroform, the private indulgence, administered with a certain quiet dignity, a solitary escape from the immense pressures of command. You can almost hear the faint, almost unheard whispers of a dark, bitter humor that circulates among the men. A quiet commentary on the injustice of it all. Upstairs, they might joke. They're high on morphine, contemplating strategy. Downstairs in the mud, we're just drunk on rum, waiting for the whistle. The distance between the chateau and the trench is not just a few miles. It is a vast, unbridgeable chasm, a world separated by privilege by access and by the very nature of their respective escapes. And you, in your cold, damp trench, are left to contemplate the quiet injustice, the silent truth of how the burdens and the comforts of war are distributed, even when it comes to the very substances that hold men together or tear them apart. The war grinds on, and with each passing week, you witness more men begin to crack under the relentless pressure. They are not struck by bullets or shrapnel, but by an unseen enemy that ravages their minds and bodies. You see them huddled in the corners of the trench, their bodies trembling uncontrollably, hands clutching at empty pockets as if searching for a phantom comfort. Their eyes are vacant, distant, staring through you, through the trench, into some terrifying, private void. Their faces are pale, gaunt, etched with an exhaustion that goes beyond mere physical fatigue. They are there, yet profoundly absent, their spirits seemingly adrift, lost somewhere in the desolate landscape of their own minds. The official records, the neatly typed reports filed by those far from the front, will state shell shock. It is a convenient label, a catch-all term that attempts to explain the inexplicable, to categorize the shattered psyches of men who have endured too much. The prevailing theory, spoken in hushed tones by medical officers, is that the very vibrations of the exploding shells have physically damaged their brains, rattling their sanity loose. But you, who have lived beside these men, who have shared their rum and their fear, know a deeper, more agonizing truth. You've seen the subtle shifts, the desperate pleas, the way their tremors worsen when the rum ration is delayed, or when the forced march pills are scarce. Many of these men, whose eyes now hold such a vacant despair, are not simply victims of the battlefield's shockwaves. They are in the agonizing throes of withdrawal. Their bodies, accustomed to the daily dose of rum, the surge of cocaine, or the numbing embrace of morphine, are now rebelling, screaming for the chemical comfort they were so readily given. But this truth is carefully, meticulously hidden. It is a secret guarded by the very fabric of the military, protected to preserve the myth of Tommy the hero, the stoic, unbreakable British soldier. To admit that these heroes, these brave men, were dependent on drugs would be to tarnish their image, to undermine the narrative of valiant sacrifice. It would chip away at the very honor the nation sought to uphold. You recall news from the United States, where scandals surrounding morphine addiction among soldiers sometimes made their way into the public newspapers, sparking debate and concern. In Britain, however, a deliberate, almost sacred silence protected this uncomfortable truth. Better, it seemed, for a man to be labeled a broken hero, a victim of the war's physical toll, than to be acknowledged as a living addict, a casualty of the very substances meant to keep him fighting. This silence, you realize, is a heavy burden, adding another layer of suffering to those who have already sacrificed so much. The war finally ends. The silence that follows the armistice is almost deafening after years of incessant noise. You return to London, a city that feels both familiar and profoundly alien. The cobbled streets, the gas lamps casting a soft glow on brick buildings, the muffled sounds of civilian life. They are all the same, yet entirely different through your eyes. You carry the weight of the trenches not just in your memories, but in your very being. Your hands still tremble, not from the cold, but from an internal tremor that never quite leaves you. Sleep is a cruel mistress, elusive and haunted by the specters of the past, leaving you restless, craving the oblivion that only morphine, or something like it, can provide. Your family, welcoming you with a mixture of relief and trepidation, watches you with worried eyes. They speak in hushed tones, attributing your tremors, your sleepless nights, your sudden outbursts of agitation to nerves, a polite, euphemistic term for the invisible wounds of war. They offer warm tea, quiet sympathy, but they cannot truly grasp the depth of your struggle, the persistent craving that gnaws at you from within. The government, in its official pronouncements, offers even less understanding. Your inability to adapt, your ongoing dependence, is often dismissed as a weakness of character, a personal failing rather than a direct consequence of the extraordinary demands placed upon you. The very substances provided by the state to enable your survival are now forgotten, denied, erased from the narrative of your return. You are not alone in this silent battle. Thousands of veterans, like you, walk the streets of Britain, ghost-like figures haunted by the war's lingering grip, their tremors, their hollow eyes, their desperate search for solace. These are not recorded in the official histories, not acknowledged in the triumphant accounts of victory. They waste away, unseen, unheard, their struggles relegated to the shadows, dismissed as individual failings. A profound, heartbreaking truth begins to emerge in the quiet corners of your mind. Britain did not just lose a generation once, on the battlefields of France and Belgium, in the mud and the shell fire. It lost them twice, once, to the horrors of war itself, their young lives extinguished in the prime of their youth, and a second time, to the insidious, unacknowledged grip of withdrawal and addiction, as they struggled, alone and unsupported, with the chemical legacies of their service. The black humor you once shared in the trenches now seems even darker. More poignant Britain, it was said, buried its soldiers at the front, in the foreign soil of distant lands. And then, with a chilling indifference, it buried their addictions right at home, deep within the collective silence and denial of a nation unwilling to face the full cost of its victory. The armistice brought an end to the thunder of the guns. But for you and countless others, the war did not truly cease. The craving, a persistent phantom limb of your wartime existence, remained. It was a hunger that no amount of food or comfort could sate, a yearning for the artificial calm or the manic energy that had seen you through the darkest days. The trenches, with their mud and constant danger, were gone, replaced by the familiar streets of England. But the internal battlefield raged on, unabated. The pubs, once places of camaraderie and fleeting escape, now become new fronts in this personal war. The rum, which had been a daily ration, a soldier's right, is no longer provided by the state. But the need remains, a deep-seated ache that demands to be filled. You see it in the eyes of your comrades, the haunted, restless gaze that searches for something, anything, to dull the persistent edges of reality. Rum is replaced by the harsher bite of gin, its clear liquid a poor substitute for the fiery warmth you remember. Morphine, once a blessed relief from agonizing pain, finds its shadow in the illicit, dangerous embrace of heroin, bought in dark alleyways and consumed in hidden corners. You sit in a smoky tavern, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and desperation. Across the worn wooden table, a comrade slumps, his head resting heavily on his arm. A dusty, tarnished medal, a testament to bravery and sacrifice, rests crookedly on his chest, its bronze surface dulled by neglect. His eyes, when they occasionally flutter open, are hollow, vacant, reflecting a profound weariness that no amount of drink can truly erase. He is one of the lost generation, a term whispered with a quiet, sorrowful reverence. These men, once vibrant and full of youthful promise, were not only erased by the shells and the bullets of the war, but by the insidious, lingering power of the syringe and the bottle. Their stories, their struggles, their very existence, often felt unacknowledged, fading into the background of a nation eager to move on, to forget the horrors. The armistice, you realize with a quiet, heavy heart, truly did end the war in a global sense. But for those like you, for the thousands who carried the invisible scars and the chemical dependencies, it did not end the cravings. It simply shifted the battleground. From the muddy fields of Flanders to the dim, smoke-filled interiors of taverns, to the lonely, desperate corners of their own minds. The silence that fills the pubs after closing time, the quiet despair etched on the faces of returning soldiers, speaks of a conflict that continues, long after the last shot was fired, a testament to a generation still fighting a war no one back home truly understood. The true narrative of the Great War, you realize, is not the one spun in patriotic speeches or depicted in heroic films. The final irony of this brutal conflict lies in the glaring contradictions that shaped your experience, an experience largely hidden from the public eye. In 1916, at the height of the war's demands, Britain, in a gesture of societal control, officially banned cocaine, branding it a dangerous poison, a menace to public health and order. It was a clear, unambiguous condemnation of a substance deemed harmful, unfit for civilian consumption. Yet, in that very same year, as the drums of war beat ever louder, you and countless other British Tommies were swallowing those very forced march pills. You ingested cocaine, not as a recreational indulgence, but as a sanctioned, even expected, part of your duty, a necessary fuel for the desperate charge, a means to push your exhausted body beyond its natural limits. Films and documentaries would later show brave, stoic Tommies, their chins set with grim determination, marching resolutely into battle, epitomes of courage and resilience. The truth, however, often looked very different. It was reflected in trembling hands that struggled to light a cigarette, in the glazed, distant eyes that stared blankly into the middle distance, in the raw, drugged courage that propelled weary bodies forward, not out of unblemished heroism, but out of a chemical imperative. The final image that lingers in your mind, a quiet, poignant tableau, is not one of glory or triumph. It is a simple, unassuming scene, a dusty, tarnished medal, perhaps one earned for some act of bravery in that chemical haze, resting gently beside a half-empty glass of rum. This image encapsulates the profound hypocrisy, the tragic contradiction that defined your wartime existence. Britain banned drugs at home, protecting its citizens from their perceived dangers. Yet it quite literally won its battles on them abroad, leveraging their potent effects to extract unimaginable feats of endurance and obedience from its soldiers. And as the story slowly draws to a close, you are left with a quiet, reflective understanding. The courage you found, the strength you mustered, the very will to go on in that muddy, terrifying landscape was often a borrowed thing, a chemical concoction. And perhaps that truth, though unsettling, is a more honest testament to the unimaginable cost of war than any medal or any triumphant tale could ever be. It is a story the wind will carry, softly, through the annals of time, until it finds its way to ears willing to truly listen. Let us ease into tonight's story, a story found not on misty moors or ancient battlements, but in the frost-rimmed cockpits and dust-choked tanks of a world at war. A journey into the annals of a forgotten chemistry and the human cost it bore. As you prepare for a restful night's sleep, or simply seek a moment of calm reflection, allow these words to carry you back to a time when the lines between medicine and might began to blur. You are there, high above the European continent, swallowed by the profound darkness of a moonless night. Inside the belly of a British Lancaster bomber, the air is thin and bitterly cold, perhaps reaching an astonishing -49 degrees Fahrenheit. It bites at your skin, seeps into your bones, and turns your breath into visible clouds that dance in the dim glow of the instrument panel. You press your gloved hand against the fuselage, feeling the intense, numbing cold seep through the thick fabric, a constant reminder of the hostile environment just inches away. Above you, the heavy drone of 4 Merlin engines is a relentless, vibrating symphony, a sound that has become the soundtrack to survival. The weight of the mission presses down, a silent, suffocating presence, heavier than any flak jacket. You understand the stakes. You are part of a crew, a small, fragile team, venturing into an unforgiving sky where the odds are stacked against you. Statistics, stark and merciless, haunt the edges of your thoughts. More than 45% of your fellow airmen will not return from these perilous bombing raids. It's a chilling number, one that lingers in the frigid air, whispering doubt and fear into the heart of even the bravest among you. Each flight is a dance with death, a gamble against the vast, dark emptiness of the night. You are not flying for glory, not for adventure. You are flying to survive, to complete the mission, and, most desperately, to make it back home to your loved ones. As the target approaches, a small, white tablet appears in a gloved palm. It is a benzodrine tablet, unremarkable in appearance, yet its potential impact is profound. This isn't a recreational indulgence. There's no thought of getting high or seeking an escape. This is a tool, a cold, clinical necessity for staying alive. You watch as a crewmate brings it to their lips, a quick, almost ritualistic gesture. It's a small act of defiance against the crushing fatigue that threatens to pull you down. A silent plea for sustained alertness when every second counts. The tablet promises to sharpen focus, to ward off the encroaching drowsiness that is a far more insidious enemy than any German fighter. Then, the world explodes around you. The night sky blossoms with angry, orange-red flashes of anti-aircraft fire, their explosions rattling the very structure of the bomber, sending tremors through your seat. Flak, like iron hail, pings against the fuselage, a terrifying drumbeat of destruction. Searchlights, blinding white spears, stab through the darkness, seeking to pin you down, exposing your vulnerability. Out there, in the inky blackness, you know night fighters lurk, their cannons eager to tear through the thin aluminum skin of your aircraft. Your oxygen mask, meant to sustain life, begins to ice over in the extreme cold, a constant threat to your breathing. a claustrophobic dampness against your face. Every nerve ending is screaming. Every muscle is tensed, ready for evasive action. The adrenaline surges, a potent, fiery rush that sharpens your senses, allowing you to react with a speed you didn't know you possessed. You are hyper-aware, your vision tunneling, your hearing tuned to every subtle change in the engine's rhythm, every distant report of gunfire. But you know, with a dread certainty, what will follow this intense high. The post-adrenaline crash, a descent into bone-weary exhaustion, a mental fog that will try to claim you the moment the immediate danger subsides. The challenge isn't just surviving the bombs away. It's surviving the long, perilous journey home. Hundreds of miles of empty sky where a moment of lapsed concentration could mean disaster. This is why the timing of that tiny pill is so critical, so meticulously debated. When do you take it too early, and you'll crash before you're out of enemy territory? Too late, and its effects won't kick in until the worst is over, leaving you vulnerable on the return flight. The calculation is a matter of life and death. An agonizing decision made in the throes of combat. There's a quieter worry, too, a subtle, uneasy feeling amongst some of the more experienced airmen. This chemical edge, while offering sharpened focus, sometimes carries an unintended consequence. Under fire, when the world is chaos and the urge to survive is primal, there are whispers of heightened aggression, a dangerous boldness that might push a pilot to take risks they wouldn't normally consider. It's a double-edged sword, this chemical courage. And as you witness these desperate measures, a thought begins to form. A question that will echo through the coming hours. Could it be possible that these chemical crutches were not just a desperate measure by one side, but a shared, darker secret of the war? Could it be that your own side, the Allies, also relied on these very same uppers to maintain the brutal pace of modern warfare? This journey into the past will reveal that the truth is far more complex, far more widespread, and far more human than the simple, one-sided narratives we often hear. You find yourself now transported to the scorching heat of North Africa, where the desert sun beats down relentlessly on endless expanses of sand. The year is 1942, and the vast, strategic canvas of El Alamein is about to be painted with the grim colors of conflict. Here, a newly surfaced memo, once carefully concealed, reveals a startling truth. Brigadier Q.V. Wallace, under the direct authority of General Bernard Montgomery, famously known as Monty, issued an extraordinary order: a mass distribution of benzedrine tablets to assault units. A desperate measure to bolster the fighting spirit and endurance of men facing an arduous, attritional battle. You imagine the hushed conversations, the ethical dilemmas weighed against the overwhelming tactical imperative. It was a decision born of sheer necessity, a gamble with the very humanity of the soldiers. The directive was precise, yet astonishing in its boldness, approximately 20 milligrams per day per man. A dose considered substantial, even by wartime standards. For the soldiers of the 24th Armored Brigade, this was double the guidance given to RAF pilots, who operated in a different kind of extreme environment. You try to envision what that means, a constant, artificial edge for every single man in an entire brigade. Not just for the adrenaline-fueled moments of an air raid, but for the relentless, grinding reality of tank warfare in the desert. It implies a conscious decision to push human limits beyond what was naturally possible, to squeeze every last drop of endurance from tired, anxious bodies. Now, imagine yourself inside a Sherman tank, a rolling coffin of steel amidst the chaos. The air inside is thick and suffocating. A noxious cocktail of dust churned up by the treads. The acrid fumes of burnt cordite from firing the main gun, and the stifling, oppressive heat radiating from the powerful engine and the sun-baked armor. It's an inferno. A metal box designed for destruction, not comfort. Around you, stacked precariously, are crates of ammunition, each round a potential explosion waiting to happen. Beneath you, 160 gallons of highly flammable fuel sloshes, a constant, terrifying reminder that your metallic shell is, in essence, a mobile bomb, one direct hit away from becoming a fiery tomb. The sheer noise is deafening, the roar of the engine, the clatter of the tracks, the concussive boom of the main gun, and the incessant rattle of every loose piece of equipment. It is a world of sensory overload, a crucible of stress and danger. In this hellish environment, the prescribed benzodrine was intended to achieve specific, vital effects. Foremost, it was about wakefulness, hours, even days. Of combat meant sleep was a luxury no one could afford. The pill was a chemical sentinel, guarding against the creeping lethargy that could cost lives. Beyond simple alertness, it was hoped to boost morale, to instill a sense of invincibility, a chemical courage in the face of overwhelming odds. And critically, it aimed to foster boldness during the brutal, prolonged dogfight phase of tank engagements. Here, tanks maneuvered, hunted, and fired at each other in close proximity, a brutal exchange where hesitation could be fatal. The benzodrine was meant to banish fear, to dull the primal instinct for self-preservation, urging men forward, always forward, into the maelstrom. But there was a dark edge, a dangerous trade-off. As fear, that essential, life-preserving instinct, was blunted, so too was careful judgment. Commanders understood that soldiers on stimulants might make riskier decisions, taking chances that, in a sober state, would be deemed suicidal. They might push too far, expose themselves unnecessarily, or underestimate the enemy's capabilities, their courage chemically amplified to the point of recklessness. You can almost feel the tension of that ethical tightrope, the desperate need for an advantage versus the potential for catastrophic, self-inflicted harm. The outcome of this desperate chemical gamble would later become chillingly clear, a stark testament to the unforgiving nature of war and the perilous choices made within it. The 24th Armored Brigade, fueled by benzodrine, fought with an unnatural ferocity, pushing themselves to the very brink of human endurance. But the cost was immense, a tragic toll that reverberated far beyond the desert sands. The unit suffered approximately 80% casualties, a devastating loss that effectively wiped them out as a cohesive fighting force. You can almost hear the silence after the battle, the empty spaces where men once stood, the profound sense of loss that even chemical enhancements could not prevent. This was the grim reality, the ultimate price paid when the lines between enhancing human performance and sacrificing human life became irrevocably blurred. For generations, a persistent myth has woven itself into the fabric of history, whispering tales of Nazis on speed, portraying Germany as an isolated outlier in the use of powerful stimulants during World War II. But as we gently peel back these layers of popular perception, you discover a far more complex and uncomfortable truth. The idea of German soldiers being uniquely fueled by drugs, while their Allied counterparts fought purely on grit and determination, is a narrative that crumbles under closer scrutiny. you begin to understand that the use of stimulants was not a peculiar German vice, but rather a widespread, almost universal response to the unprecedented demands of modern warfare. It shattered the one-sided myth, revealing a shared chemical reality that spanned battle lines. The two primary players in this chemical drama were Pervitin, a potent methamphetamine favored by the Germans, and benzedrine, an amphetamine widely used by the Allies. You might imagine them as distinct, almost alien substances. But in truth, their effects were remarkably similar. Pervitin, with its slightly different chemical structure, allowed for faster penetration of the blood-brain barrier, delivering its stimulating rush with a more immediate, intense impact. Benzedrine, while perhaps a bit slower to take hold, still offered that crucial surge of alertness, a heightened sense of focus, and often a powerful wave of euphoria. Both essentially functioned as powerful wake-up calls for the brain, pushing fatigue to the background and sharpening the user's senses, allowing them to endure the unbearable. What made their military adoption so seamless, so almost frictionless, was their widespread pre-war availability. You might be surprised to learn that these substances weren't born in secret laboratories for the sole purpose of war. Pervitin was sold over the counter in Germany, marketed as a pick-me-up for housewives and factory workers, even appearing in chocolates. Benzedrine, too, was readily available in the United States and Britain, notably as an inhaler for nasal congestion, meaning millions had already been exposed to its stimulating effects, albeit in different forms. This familiarity meant that when war came, there was no long gemats and drawn-out debate about introducing an alien substance. It was already part of the societal landscape, making its transition to the battlefield almost natural. To the commanders of the era, these chemical compounds were not viewed with the same moral trepidation we might feel today. Instead, they were seen through a purely pragmatic lens, as just another form of technology, akin to the development of radar, the refinement of rockets, or the increasing power of the internal combustion engine. They were tools designed to enhance performance, to gain an edge, to optimize the human machine for the brutal efficiency of conflict. You can almost hear the cold, calculating logic if a pill could keep a pilot awake for an extra 2 hours, or make a tank crew bolder in a critical assault. Then it was simply another weapon in the arsenal, another piece of the puzzle in achieving victory. Ethics often took a back seat to expediency when national survival was on the line. Yet, even as these drugs were embraced as technological marvels, the seeds of their darker side were being sown. The subtle, insidious side effects on judgment began to emerge. That heightened aggression, that blunting of fear we touched upon earlier, could lead to disastrous decisions. And then there was the question of dependency, the slow, creeping reliance that could transform a pragmatic tool into a personal prison. These were not just theoretical concerns. They were the very real, human consequences beginning to manifest on the front lines. To fully grasp this pervasive use, we must look for tangible evidence, for the physical proof that remains to this day, and for the courageous, often clandestine, trials conducted to understand these powerful compounds. In a moment, you'll discover a fascinating piece of physical evidence in a sunken aircraft and hear about the groundbreaking, yet ethically challenging, in-flight tests conducted by Allied scientists, proving that this chemical arms race was a truly global phenomenon. Imagine the serene, cold beauty of a Norwegian fjord, its glassy surface reflecting the towering, snow-capped mountains. Here, for decades, a secret lay submerged in the low oxygen depths. perfectly preserved by the frigid embrace of the water. Then, one day, from this watery grave, a relic of a bygone era, was gently raised a German Heinkel Ha-115, a twin-engine reconnaissance seaplane. Its airframe was remarkably intact. A ghost from the past pulled into the present. You can almost hear the water dripping from its metal skin, seeing the barnacles clinging to its fuselage as it emerges, a silent testament to a forgotten mission. This discovery, however, held far more than just the echoes of its final flight. It carried within it a startling piece of evidence that illuminated the pragmatic, almost clinical, approach to stimulant use. Within one of the wings, carefully stowed in a survival kit, was a collection of items intended to offer a fighting chance against the unforgiving elements. You can almost picture the small, waterproof pouch, a bottle of brandy, offering warmth and a momentary reprieve from the bone-chilling cold. Bars of caffeine-laced chocolate, a quick energy boost, cigarettes, a familiar comfort, a momentary stress reliever. And there, amongst these seemingly innocuous items, was a small packet of Pervitin. Though the tablets themselves had dissolved over the decades in the saline solution during the cleaning process, their very presence in that kit spoke volumes. It was not mere anecdotal evidence. It was a tangible, physical link to the chemical strategies of survival. The placement of this Pervitin was crucial, a detail that reveals much about its intended use. It was not found in the cockpit, nestled alongside the pilot's immediate flight controls, suggesting it wasn't meant for casual in-flight consumption to merely stay awake during routine patrols. Instead, its place within the survival kit pointed to a much more specific, more desperate purpose to be used post-crash. Imagine a crew, having ditched their aircraft in the icy waters of the North Sea, fighting for their lives against the crushing grip of hypothermia and the overwhelming urge to succumb to sleep. The logic behind its inclusion was chillingly clear to provide a chemical surge of vigilance, an artificial shield against the deadly embrace of the elements. Consider the grim reality of surviving for 12 hours on the North Sea, a terrifying ordeal in the best of conditions. The freezing water rapidly saps body heat, inducing confusion, despair, and finally, unconsciousness. In this desperate scenario, the survival kit's contents would act in concert, the alcohol offering a fleeting sense of warmth and a blunting of pain, the nicotine providing a brief, sharp hit, the caffeine offering mental alertness, and then the methamphetamine, Pervitin, kicking in to provide sustained wakefulness, to keep a man fighting for consciousness, alert to any sign of rescue, pushing back against the encroaching darkness of hypothermia-induced slumber. It was a cocktail designed not for pleasure, but for the stark, brutal calculus of survival. A final, desperate attempt to prolong life when all other hope seemed lost. As you picture the sleek lines of the Heinkel, perhaps viewing some historical footage of its camouflaged form slicing through the air, or its torpedoes slung beneath its belly, you gain a deeper understanding of the missions these crews undertook. They were often solitary, dangerous reconnaissance flights, or daring anti-shipping operations, pushing the boundaries of human endurance. The discovery of that Pervitin in the survival kit drives home a crucial takeaway, a nuance often lost in the broader narrative. This wasn't about casual abuse or a culture of getting high during flights. It was a pragmatic, almost clinical, application of a powerful chemical, reserved for the direst of circumstances, when the very line between life and death hung precariously in the balance. It was a testament to the desperate ingenuity of wartime, where every possible tool was considered to give a man even a slight edge against the overwhelming forces of nature and conflict. As we drift from the chilling fjords, we arrive at the spring of 1940, a pivotal moment in the unfolding drama of World War II. It was a time when the world watched in stunned disbelief as the German Wehrmacht unleashed its new doctrine of Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, tearing through Western Europe with unprecedented speed and ferocity. You can almost feel the ground trembling under the relentless advance. Hear the distant rumble of tanks, the terrifying whine of dive bombers. What you might not immediately realize is that this astonishing pace, this seemingly superhuman endurance, was, in part, chemically fueled. In a staggering logistical feat, the German military distributed approximately 35 million Pervitin tablets in a mere 10 to 12 weeks. Imagine that number, a mountain of pills, saturating the ranks, touching countless lives, a silent, unseen tide rushing through the veins of an entire army. The objectives behind this mass chemical deployment were clear, direct, and ruthlessly effective. Foremost, it was about suppressing sleep. The Blitzkrieg demanded continuous, relentless movement. To halt was to lose momentum, to give the enemy a chance to regroup. Soldiers and tank crews, driven by the drug, could push through days and nights of continuous combat, their bodies screaming for rest, but their minds kept artificially awake. Secondly, it aimed to sharpen focus. In the chaos of battle, clarity of thought was paramount, and Pervitin promised to deliver it, cutting through the fog of war and fatigue. And perhaps most powerfully, it sought to dampen fear, to mute the primal instinct for self-preservation that could cause hesitation, allowing for the rapid, deep penetrations and encirclements that characterized the Blitzkrieg. You can almost feel the artificial calm, the strange, detached bravery that must have settled over those men as they pushed forward into the unknown. The operational results of this chemically enhanced blitz were undeniable, etched into the history books. German forces executed lightning-fast, deep penetrations, bypassing fortifications and overwhelming enemy lines with bewildering speed. This relentless, non-stop advance created immense pressure on the Allied forces, culminating in the desperate, hurried evacuation from Dunkirk. You can envision the scenes of chaos on the beaches. The Allied soldiers trapped, exhausted, and bewildered by an enemy that seemed to never tire. The Pervitin, for a time, appeared to be the miracle drug, an unseen weapon that bent human physiology to the will of the High Command, allowing for a sustained level of aggression and endurance that fundamentally altered the pace of warfare. Yet, amidst the strategic triumphs, there were profound human costs, often relayed in the haunting anecdotes of veterans. You hear the echoes of their experiences, the quiet terror of never sleeping again, the unsettling sensation of their bodies and minds being hijacked by the drug. Soldiers reported intense highs, followed by crushing lows, paranoia, irritability, and a desperate craving for sleep that sometimes bordered on hallucination. Imagine the psychological toll of being perpetually awake, unable to find natural rest, feeling your own body rebel against the constant stimulation. These were the hidden burdens carried by the men who were expected to be superhuman, their sacrifices extending far beyond the immediate dangers of combat. Both the Luftwaffe, providing air support, and the ground forces were deeply implicated in this widespread use, demonstrating its integration across the military apparatus. This brings us to a crucial, lingering question that hovers over this chapter of history. Were these pills truly decisive in the success of the Blitzkrieg? Or is their legend perhaps overstated? Was it the chemical edge that sealed victory, or merely an amplifier of superior tactics, training, and logistics? You begin to ponder the intricate interplay of factors that contribute to military success. It's a complex tapestry where human ingenuity, material resources, and sheer will intertwine with the subtle, often unseen, influence of chemistry. While the immediate effects of Pervitin were undeniably impactful, the long-term consequences and the question of its ultimate decisiveness remain a point of quiet historical reflection, a testament to the enduring mystery of human behavior under the extreme pressures of war. As we contemplate the astonishing speed of the Blitzkrieg, you might naturally wonder about the true source of that relentless pace. Was it purely the chemical fuel of Pervitin, or were there other, more fundamental elements at play? Let us shift our focus now to a tangible comparison, a quiet study in contrasts that sheds light on the very nature of military endurance. Imagine the German soldier, clad in his gear. You picture the distinctive leather straps, the metal buckles, the various pouches and mess tins clanking together. It's an array designed for durability and function, but one that could be quite noisy, as if carrying a loose cutlery drawer into battle. Now, contrast this with his British counterpart, whose equipment, predominantly made of canvas, was designed for a different kind of efficiency, quiet movement, less rattling, a more subdued presence on the battlefield. This seemingly small detail speaks to different philosophies of combat, different approaches to the very act of soldiering. To truly understand the capabilities of these soldiers, even without chemical enhancement, we can look to a modern reenactor march test. Imagine yourself participating, shouldering a substantial load, perhaps 60 pounds of equipment, mimicking the burden carried by an infantryman. The test is simple: march a significant distance, fueled only by the conventional stimulants of the era. No Pervitin, no Benzedrine. Instead, you would rely on the familiar comforts and natural boosts of tea or coffee, perhaps supplemented by a square of caffeine chocolate, a common item in many soldiers' rations. It's a testament to human resilience and the power of simpler forms of stimulation. The results of such a march are profoundly illuminating. Imagine striding out, the rhythmic crunch of your boots on the ground, the ache in your shoulders, but also the steady determination in your heart. The test demonstrated that covering 14 miles in under 4 hours was entirely feasible. Extending this pace, it became clear that a well-trained, disciplined soldier, even under the significant burden of 60 pounds of gear, could realistically cover 22 miles in a single day without the aid of methamphetamine. You can almost feel the rhythm of that march, the sense of accomplishment, the quiet pride in sheer physical and mental fortitude. This outcome carries a significant implication, one that quietly challenges the notion that stimulants were the sole, or even primary, driver of the Blitzkrieg's speed. It suggests that discipline, robust logistics, and rigorous training could, in themselves, explain much of the German military's astonishing pace. You begin to understand that an army forged in meticulous preparation, with efficient supply lines and highly drilled soldiers, could achieve remarkable feats of endurance and rapid movement, simply through the optimization of human potential, rather than its chemical override. It points to the fundamental truth that a well-oiled military machine is a complex interplay of many factors, not just one. The nuance here is crucial, a delicate distinction in our understanding of these wartime chemicals. Stimulants, whether Pervitin or Benzedrine, were not magic potions that instantly transformed ordinary men into superhuman warriors. Instead, they acted as amplifiers. They took existing capabilities, a soldier's training, his stamina, his courage, and pushed them to their absolute limit, allowing him to bypass the natural need for rest and recovery. They amplified what was already there, extending the capacity for sustained effort, sharpening an already trained focus, and dulling a naturally present fear. The chemical didn't create the soldier. It merely optimized his performance in the most demanding conditions imaginable. As you reflect on this, the quiet question echoes in your mind, prompting a deeper contemplation: training versus chemistry. It's a question that invites us to look beyond the sensational and appreciate the profound, often unsung, power of human discipline and preparation in the face of extraordinary adversity. Our journey now takes us to the highest echelons of British power, into the hallowed halls where decisions of war and destiny were forged. You can almost feel the tension in the air, the heavy weight of responsibility resting on the shoulders of leaders. It was Sir Charles Wilson, a respected medical advisor, who brought a chilling piece of intelligence to the attention of Prime Minister Winston Churchill. The Germans, he reported, were not just fighting with conventional weapons, they were employing methamphetamine, a powerful stimulant, to fuel their relentless war machine. You can imagine the grim look on Churchill's face, a man deeply committed to innovation and gaining any advantage possible in the brutal conflict. This was not merely a medical observation. It was a strategic revelation, prompting an urgent need for the British to respond in kind, to level the playing field in this unseen chemical arms race. Sir Charles's recommendation was stark and clear. Britain must immediately commence trials of similar substances. Fortuitously for the British, a readily available solution already existed within their own borders: Benzedrine. Unlike the German Pervitin, which might have required new pharmaceutical pipelines, Benzedrine was already common. You might recall it being found in civilian tablets and, most notably, in over-the-counter inhalers used to clear nasal passages. This pre-existing public familiarity and pharmaceutical infrastructure meant that there was an easy, established pipeline to funnel this stimulant directly to the Royal Air Force and the Army. It wasn't a question of inventing something new. It was a matter of redirecting an existing resource towards a new, urgent military purpose. This convenience greatly accelerated its adoption and distribution across the forces. Churchill, a figure known for his forward-thinking approach to technology and his willingness to embrace unconventional solutions, adopted a pragmatic stance. He was not one to shy away from experimental measures if they promised a tactical advantage. His posture was clear if the enemy was using it, and if it could potentially save British lives or turn the tide of battle, then it was to be trialed. You can almost hear his booming voice, cutting through any potential ethical hesitations with the urgency of wartime necessity. He was prepared to greenlight trials under the most extreme conditions, imaginable active combat. This willingness to test powerful drugs on his own servicemen in the crucible of war speaks volumes about the desperate nature of the conflict and the imperative to explore every avenue for victory. With Churchill's endorsement, the use of Benzedrine began to move beyond ad hoc battlefield decisions and into the realm of institutionalized practice. You envision the quiet, efficient machinery of the military medical establishment swinging into action. Procurement channels were established to ensure a steady supply of the drug. Medical oversight committees were formed, albeit often reacting to, rather than dictating, the pace of events. And crucial dosing guidance began to harden, moving from vague recommendations to specific instructions designed to maximize effect while minimizing immediate harm. This was the beginning of a systematic integration of psychoactive compounds into military strategy, transforming a civilian medicine into a weapon of war. However, beneath the surface of this clinical efficiency, an ethical tension simmered. On one side stood the undeniable argument for performance enhancement if a pilot could fly longer, a soldier could fight harder, and lives could be saved by maintaining alertness. Then the drugs were a moral imperative. On the other side lay the profound concerns of dependence and discipline. What were the long-term effects on the individual? Would soldiers become reliant on these pills, losing their natural resilience and capacity for self-discipline? These were not abstract philosophical questions, but very real human dilemmas that began to manifest themselves in the quiet corridors of power and, more acutely, on the front lines. To truly understand these effects, you are now invited to witness a pioneering, ethically complex experiment as we anticipate the groundbreaking work of Dr. Roland Winfield, who bravely rode along with air crews, dosing them in flight, observing firsthand the profound impact of these chemical allies. As we delve deeper into the British response, you are invited to bear witness to a truly remarkable and ethically complex chapter of wartime medicine. Imagine the biting cold and claustrophobia, the thunderous roar of engines, and the ever-present threat of enemy fire. For we are about to join Dr. Roland Winfield. He was an unsung hero, a pioneer who conducted the only known combat amphetamine trials in history. He didn't just study reports from afar, he flew with the Royal Air Force crews. In their cramped, unforgiving aircraft, meticulously administering drugs or placebos, and then, with quiet intensity, collecting their in-air reports. You can almost feel the vibration of the plane beneath you. Hear the steady, calm voice of Winfield asking questions as bombs drop and flak explodes around you. It was a perilous, groundbreaking endeavor, bringing the scientific method into the heart of battle. To fully appreciate the significance of Winfield's work, you must grasp the sheer level of stress these airmen endured. You are seated in a tiny, cramped tin can hurtling through the stratosphere, a metal shell not designed for comfort, but for war. The aircraft is unpressurized, meaning the air is thin and frigid, forcing you to breathe through an oxygen mask for hours on end. Outside, the night is a terrifying canvas of danger, blinding searchlights that can pinpoint your every move, blossoming explosions of flak that shake the very structure of the plane, and the ever-present threat of enemy fighter aircraft, their cannons eager to tear through your defenses. The constant drone of the engines is a numbing background, punctuated by the sudden, heart-stopping screams of the airframe under stress. Every nerve is taut, every sense is on high alert, creating an environment where fatigue is a deadly enemy. Within this crucible of stress, Winfield made a crucial finding, a piece of knowledge that would directly influence the safety and effectiveness of bomber crews. He discovered the optimal timing for benzedrine dosage approximately 1.5 hours before Basimusa bombs away. This wasn't arbitrary. His trials showed that dosing at this specific window allowed the stimulant to reach its peak effectiveness just as the most intense period of the raid, the actual bomb run, was ending. The goal was not just to keep crews awake during the mission, but critically, to provide a chemical cushion against the inevitable and debilitating post-adrenaline crash. This crash, a sudden plunge into profound exhaustion and mental fog after the immediate danger passed, was a major cause of accidents on the long, vulnerable journey back to base. By timing the pill this way, Winfield aimed to ensure crews remained alert and capable during the perilous return flight, minimizing the chances of error when they were most vulnerable. However, Winfield also observed a troubling side effect, one that carried its own dangers. He noted a heightened aggression in some crews who had taken the benzedrine. It wasn't just a matter of increased boldness. There were instances where crews, instead of simply dropping their bombs and returning, would stoop low after their primary target, deliberately attacking flak sites with their machine guns, exposing themselves to unnecessary risk. You can almost feel the surge of irrational confidence, the dangerous bravado that might momentarily override the instinct for self-preservation. This aggressive impulse, while perhaps stemming from a desire to strike back at the enemy, was a worrying development, suggesting that the chemical edge could sometimes lead to recklessness. The RAF, in reviewing Winfield's findings, grappled with this complex reality. While recognizing the immediate benefits of sustained alertness, there was a growing worry that crews might begin to lean too heavily on these pills, using them as a substitute for adequate rest and proper scheduling. You can sense the tension between the immediate tactical advantage and the long-term concern for the well-being and discipline of their airmen. Would benzedrine become a crutch, eroding the very resilience it was meant to enhance? This concern, this delicate balance between chemical assistance and human responsibility, became a central theme in the ongoing debate. Looking back, you can now connect Winfield's meticulous work to our very first scene, where a pilot made that agonizing life-or-death timing choice in the cold cockpit, a choice profoundly influenced by these very trials. A desperate gamble for survival in the vast, unforgiving skies. Let us now return to the ground, to the unforgiving landscapes where tanks clashed and the lives of men were measured in fractions of an inch of steel. You are standing on a dusty, windswept battlefield, where the air hums with tension and the ground vibrates with the distant thunder of artillery. Here, a formidable German weapon dominated the field, the Pak-40 anti-tank gun and its dual-purpose sibling, the Flak 88. These were not mere guns, they were instruments of terror, renowned for their incredibly high muzzle velocity and their devastating accuracy. To a Sherman tank crew, encountering an 88 was often a death sentence. You can almost feel the cold dread that would grip a crew as the distinctive report of an 88 echoed across the battlefield, knowing that its next target could be them. To truly understand the lethality of these weapons, imagine a live fire demonstration. You watch as a thick plate of armor, similar to that protecting a Sherman tank, stands before you. Then, with a deafening roar and a blinding flash, an 88 mm shell strikes the plate. The immediate impact is violent, but the most insidious damage occurs on the inside. Even if the shell does not fully penetrate, the immense force of the impact causes shards of superheated metal, known as spalling, to tear away from the interior surface of the armor. You envision these fragments, moving at incredible speeds, transforming the tank's interior into a storm of lethal shrapnel. It's a terrifying, almost invisible killer. A silent rain of death that can maim or kill a crew without ever technically penetrating the tank. Now, picture this horrific scenario unfolding inside the closed hull of a Sherman tank. The penetrating or near-penetrating hit unleashes not just spalling, but also a massive pressure wave that slams into the crew, disorienting and concussing them. Add to this the terrifying risk of cooking off the stowed rounds of ammunition, turning the tank into an inferno. The space is already cramped, hot, and claustrophobic. with fragments flying and the air thick with the smell of scorched metal and fear. Survival seems almost impossible. This was the brutal reality for tank crews, a world where courage and caution had to be perfectly balanced, where every decision could mean the difference between life and a gruesome death. This brings us to a crucial and tragic link between the pharmaceutical aid and the battlefield outcome. Benzedrine-amped boldness. You recall how benzedrine was meant to enhance morale and foster daring. But in the face of such overwhelming firepower, this chemically induced bravado could have a devastating consequence. It led to rash charges, to tank crews pushing forward with an almost suicidal disregard for hidden threats, sometimes directly into the well-camouflaged positions of those deadly 88mm guns. You can almost hear the frantic shouts of their commanders, urging caution. But the amplified courage, the blunted fear, propelled them onward. It was a dangerous gamble, fueled by an artificial sense of invincibility, a fatal miscalculation in the face of overwhelming odds. The grim payoff of this chemically influenced recklessness, this tragic intersection of enhanced courage and superior firepower, can be seen in the fate of the 24th Armored Brigade, the very unit General Montgomery had equipped with benzedrine. You recall their staggering casualty rate of approximately 80%, a devastating blow that rendered them combat ineffective. While many factors contributed to this loss, the role of altered judgment, of fear being too effectively blunted, cannot be ignored. It serves as a haunting reminder, a stark lesson etched in the sand and steel of the desert. As you reflect on this, a somber truth emerges, one that transcends the specifics of World War II and resonates with the very essence of survival. Fear keeps you alive. It is not a weakness, but a vital, primal instinct, a guardian against recklessness, a crucial part of what makes us human, and ultimately, what allows us to endure. As the echoes of the 88mm gun fade, we gently transition to the closing acts of World War II and the profound aftermath that reshaped societies. In late war Germany, a stark shift occurred regarding methamphetamine. The very stimulant that had fueled the Blitzkrieg was now being restricted, its widespread side effects and the growing problem of addiction becoming undeniable burdens. You can almost feel the weariness settling over the nation. The realization that what was once seen as a miracle drug carried a heavy, insidious cost. Yet, even as they acknowledged the dangers, Germany's desperate pursuit of wonder weapons in the war's final days meant that stimulants still found a place, particularly in highly specialized, extreme contexts. Imagine the claustrophobic confines of a German mini-submarine, designed for 1 or 2 men on perilous, multi-day missions lasting up to 48 hours. Here, in the crushing darkness and immense psychological pressure of extreme confinement, stimulants were once again deemed essential. They were used to maintain vigilance, to ward off the encroaching madness of isolation and sensory deprivation, and to bolster the fragile morale of men facing almost certain death. You can almost feel the cold metal pressing in, the desperate need for any chemical edge to keep the mind sharp and the spirit unbroken in such an unforgiving environment. But the dark chapter of stimulant use reached its most horrifying nadir in the atrocities committed at Sachsenhausen concentration camp. Here, in a chilling testament to the utter depravity of the Nazi regime, prisoners were coerced into forced tests. They were given chewing gum laced with cocaine and methamphetamine, then made to march tirelessly on a circular track, day after day, week after week. It was a horrific human experiment, designed to determine the optimal dosage and combination of drugs for soldiers carrying heavy loads over long distances. You can almost hear the rhythmic shuffle of their feet, the quiet agony in their eyes, as their bodies and minds were systematically exploited, stripped of all dignity and humanity in the service of a monstrous ideology. The year 1945 brought the inevitable collapse of the regime. You can almost feel the world exhaling, the weight of years of war finally lifting. Adolf Hitler, the architect of so much destruction, committed suicide, his body found in the ruins of Berlin. Hermann Goering, one of the most powerful figures in the Nazi hierarchy, died a noted heroin addict, a stark, tragic symbol of the personal tolls exacted by war and the very substances that were once seen as tools of power. The war ended, but the chemical story was far from over. The cessation of hostilities, ironically, did not mark the end of the amphetamine story. Instead, it merely redirected its trajectory. The 1950s ushered in a massive amphetamine boom, particularly in America. What had been a military secret now became a civilian panacea. You can almost see the advertisements of the era amphetamines were widely marketed for weight loss, as mood elevators, and as a general pick-me-up for a bustling, increasingly fast-paced society. They even appeared on airline menus, an easy solution for weary travelers. This was the era of cultural icons like Marilyn Monroe, who reportedly used amphetamines, and writers like Jack Kerouac, whose creative output was famously fueled by them. This widespread, largely unregulated use led directly to America's first prescription drug epidemic, a quiet crisis unfolding in the living rooms and offices of everyday citizens. Our journey through this hidden history concludes with a profound, yet gentle, thesis. To the commanders of World War II, both Allied and Axis, stimulants were not viewed through the moral lens we might apply today. They were simply another tool, another piece of technology in an arsenal filled with increasingly devastating weapons. They were a means to an end, a pragmatic solution to the insurmountable demands of modern warfare, perceived as essential for maintaining alertness, boosting morale, and achieving strategic objectives. Yet, their legacy is complex. A delicate balance between the undeniable benefits of life-saving alertness in extreme conditions and the profound, often tragic, ethical cost. It is a legacy that quietly reminds us how close the line can become between chemical aid and human harm. A story that continues to resonate, long after the last bombs have fallen and the last pills have been swallowed. And perhaps, as you drift into a restful slumber, you'll carry with you this understanding of a nuanced past, where the lines between medicine and might blurred, leaving an indelible mark on both history and humanity.